And so now I want to give you a chance to hear two short excerpts from books of the Mentoris Project. First, it's my great pleasure to welcome an old friend we met several years ago when we were both writing and producing on Touched by an Angel, and we've continued to collaborate in many ways. She has written and edited many books, including, may I put in a promotion for something else, the forthcoming collection of essays on women screenwriters in early Hollywood, When Women Wrote Hollywood, which features profiles written by alums from the program that we are both affiliated with, the Stevens College MFA in TV and Screenwriting, which is well represented here tonight, I know. So please welcome Dr. Rosanne Welch to read from her book, America's Forgotten Founding Father, a novel based on the life of Filippo Mazzei. Rosanne.
I want to dedicate this reading to my grandparents, who were the original immigrants from Italy, from Jura, Sicily, in 1909 and 1925, respectively, and my mother, who is their youngest child, who's sitting there tonight next to my son, their great-grandson, who's named after Giuseppe Italiano. And this is from America's Forgotten Founding Father. He is the man who lived next door to Thomas Jefferson and wrote the words, "All men are created equal," for the first time on this land. And he's only recently been credited with that by our very Congress. So, the friendship that was to last a lifetime began as Virginia planter Thomas Adams' carriage rode up the grand driveway of Monticello. Filippo saw at a glance how much Jefferson esteemed all things Italian. The neoclassical design of the main home came from the principles described by Italian Renaissance architect Andrea Palladio. "How do you know that?" Adams asked Filippo as they drove. "I have read Palladio's 4 books of architecture, both as a student, and later when I moved to London, I used the English version to help me learn the language. Among all the architects in Europe, Palladio is considered the most influential individual in the history of architecture. His precepts are unforgettable." Filippo felt the pride of his homeland as he took in the grandeur of the 4 columns and the center rotunda of Monticello. "To see my culture echoed in this new land." "It means you belong here, my friend," said Adams. More than the echo of Italian architecture, Filippo felt at home the moment the 32-year-old Jefferson stepped out the front portico, all 6 feet 2 inches of him. Jefferson greeted them in Italian, though he mispronounced ciao, saying it phonetically, "Ciao." For an instant, Filippo did not know how to respond. To correct his host seemed disrespectful, but to allow him to continue uncorrected could cause embarrassment later. Jefferson clearly saw the confusion on Filippo's face and switched to English. "You must excuse my pronunciation, sir," began Jefferson. "Have only read the language up until now. I have never heard the words spoken aloud. I hope I have caused no offense." "Oh, no offense taken," promised Filippo immediately in English. "The great Jefferson has made a mistake?" laughed Adams heartily. "I knew Filippo would be an asset to the colonies." Filippo switched to Italian to say, "Ciao e grazie mille," pronouncing each word slowly so that Jefferson would take note, which he certainly did. "Thank you for offering such generous hospitality in such an elegant home." Jefferson basked in the compliment to his pride and joy. "I have often said that Italy is a field where the inhabitants of our southern states may see much to copy in our own agriculture." Jefferson said, again trying to exercise his Italian. Adams laughed heartily. "Would anyone care to translate, or shall I retire to my room and allow you two to continue the lessons?" "We shall all retire," Jefferson said. "After our guest has done me one more favor." "Anything," said Filippo. "May you please allow me to hear the name of my home pronounced by a native?" Jefferson asked. "Of course," said Filippo, as he stood on the portico himself, admiring the view of the main gardens and the mountains beyond. Then he said, "Monticello," phonetically. "Monticello," little mount. "Ah," Jefferson noted, "your CE is pronounced ch. I shall remember that. Italian is such a delightful language, but I fear learning it has confounded my French and my Spanish." Then Filippo watched warmly as Jefferson himself looked out over his land and said for the first time, "Monticello." As it had been such a long trip, the men all retired to their rooms, with Jefferson extracting a promise that Filippo would rise early and join him on his morning rounds. So before breakfast, the 2 men set out on foot across leaf-strewn paths to see what Jefferson had built. Filippo said quietly, not wanting to disturb the peace, "Que bella vista." "That's why I wanted to own this land, not merely inherit my father's next door," said Jefferson. My father forewent tobacco a few years ago for wheat. He's influenced by Washington, who fancies himself a great farmer, though I'm convinced he's a better surveyor. But I thought tobacco was the darling crop of Europe, said Filippo. The problem is tobacco can wear out your soil if you're not careful about its cultivation. And at this time in our relations to our mother country, Jefferson said, wheat exports do not require the same financial entanglements with English merchants, so many of my neighbors have moved away from tobacco. But if my eyes do not deceive me, you have not made this move, said Filippo. Some English merchants have begun to sell tobacco at a price too low to suit the planters in Virginia. They hope to break our ability to, dare I say it, foment rebellion. But my connections still pay me well. Perhaps the merchants were told what I was told, that New England is the center of this rebellion, said Filippo. Ha! That's what John and Sam Adams want you to think, said Jefferson. They may have a corner on the rhetoric, but we have the funds to support such an adventure. Filippo could tell Jefferson was feeling him out to see which side Filippo would take, since he had recently been living in England. I believe in freedom, Filippo stated clearly. I have seen too much of those in power dictating how those in poor circumstances must live. Then we're in agreement, said Jefferson. As Filippo shook hands, he noted with irony the small wooden cabins that dotted the edges of the field, enough to house the individual enslaved families that Filippo saw already at work. Filippo knew he would have to resolve his thoughts about this enslaved labor if he was going to succeed in this new community. So he was happy to see that Jefferson also employed some paid labor and some indentured servants. Filippo hoped that his own use of those paid forms of labor exclusively might prove an example for his new friend. But this was not yet the time to broach such a deep subject. As they walked, Jefferson talked at length about his serious study of the Italian language. Around 1764, he had purchased an Italian-English dictionary and 3 more historical works in Italian: Dante's Divine Comedy, the complete works of Niccolò Machiavelli, and that copy of Andrea Palladio's 4 books of architecture, all in the original Italian. He flipped through his journal and pulled out a quote that he liked. "We must contrive a building in such a manner that the finest and most noble parts be the most exposed to public view, and the less agreeable removed from sight as much as possible." "Why the interest in a country that you have yet to see?" Filippo asked. "I could ask you the same, my friend," observed Jefferson. "For me, Roman taste, genius, magnificence, it excites ideas in me, and I know I will see Italy someday." As Jefferson's linguistic skills grew, he had begun to fill the pages of his commonplace book with extracts from well-loved classical poems. He and Filippo debated their favorite poets. For Filippo, it was Virgil. For Jefferson at this time, it was Aeschylus. Jefferson's favorite was one that Filippo wasn't sure about. He wanted to brag about Virgil and the storm. "In Virgil, I feel the power of the sea," agreed Jefferson. "But with Aeschylus, I feel the power of the heart." Then Jefferson recited in a much quieter voice, "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." "Granted, that gives me shivers," said Filippo, "but for such a young man with so much to look forward to, it seems a sad poem on which to settle." Jefferson pondered that thought silently as they crossed over into the land owned by Edward Carter, a poor neighbor of Jefferson's, who was hoping to sell his 400-acre farm and move inland where he could afford to accommodate his 12 children. "You have brought me here for a reason other than to debate the merits of our favorite poets," said Filippo. "Perhaps," said Jefferson. "I love this land, and I intend to live out my life here. But without society, men are never contented. Buy this land, live near me, and we can build a society to our taste. The young James Madison, who I hear you've already met, will inherit the land next door from his father a few years from now." "But I've yet to see the land that Mr. Adams has offered to sell me in Augusta County," said Filippo. "Our soil is much more fertile for wine than anywhere in the country," said Jefferson. "How do you know?" asked Filippo, "since no one has yet tried to cultivate wine in any of your colonies?" Jefferson admitted that no one could know for sure which soil would be best, but most wine drinkers, and therefore most customers, are here in my section of Virginia. Besides, I'm deeply interested in the agricultural prospects of this state. If you live beside me, I may watch you cultivate wine, and the almonds and the olives and the other Mediterranean plants he brought from a front row seat. More and more amazed at how two men born in countries so far from each other, into such seemingly different families and cultures, could share so much in common, that Filippo swayed closer to Jefferson's plan. When finally the Virginian threw in a large number of his own acres to add to Filippo's holdings, he couldn't help but agree. Neighbors, they would be, for life.
Wonderful.